A man quits his job with no backup plan. 3 years later, he's worth $8 million. He wasn't trying to get rich, he was trying to stay sane. That's not luck, that's a pattern. The painter who refused to sell her work for 2 decades suddenly has collectors bidding 6 figures per piece. The software engineer who walked away from Silicon Valley to teach kids accidentally builds a platform generating $400,000 a year while he sleeps. The woman who left investment banking to live in a van ends up consulting for the same firm she abandoned, at triple her old salary, working 4 hours a week. None of them were chasing money. Most of them were running from it. And that's exactly why they found it. Here's what nobody tells you. Chasing money changes how you think. It makes you desperate. Desperate people make decisions from fear. They take the safe job that slowly kills them. They launch businesses designed to impress investors instead of solve problems. And the market can smell that from a mile away. Your body language changes when you're desperate. The way you pitch, the way you price. Even if you think you're hiding it, people can sense the need radiating off you. And need repels opportunity the same way confidence attracts it. But the moment you stop chasing, something breaks open. You stop asking what will sell and start asking what matters. You stop trying to be valuable and start actually becoming valuable. And that shift changes everything. This is reverse financial psychology. The paradox that detachment from money is often what makes you magnetic to it. Not because the universe rewards purity, but because your behavior fundamentally transforms when you're no longer operating from scarcity. A study from Cornell University tracked 2,000 entrepreneurs over 15 years. The ones who started businesses purely for profit had a 73% failure rate within 5 years. The ones who started because they were solving a problem they personally cared about? Only 31% failed. And the survivors weren't just staying afloat. They were scaling faster, raising capital easier, and reporting significantly higher life satisfaction. Because when you're chasing money, you're not listening to the market. You're listening to your anxiety. You're building what you think will sell, not what needs to exist. And that optimization toward short-term profit is exactly what prevents you from building anything that actually compounds. When you're not desperate to monetize every interaction, you give value freely. When you give value freely, you build trust. And trust is the only real currency that compounds infinitely. Think about the last time you bought something expensive. You didn't buy it from the person begging for the sale. You bought it from the person who made you feel like they'd be fine whether you bought or not. That calm confidence. That's what detachment looks like from the outside. And it's intoxicating. There's a full breakdown of how this mechanism works, the hidden psychological patterns, the neuroscience behind why detachment creates magnetism, the exact behaviors that separate accidental wealth builders from chronic strivers. It's all inside the Hidden Money Report, linked in the pinned comment before it disappears. Because maybe the people who stop chasing money are the ones who finally stop running from themselves. And maybe that's when they become someone the world can't ignore. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus spent 7 years in investment banking, 80-hour weeks, $200,000 a year by 29. Everyone said he made it, but Marcus was dying from the inside out. Every morning he woke up with his jaw clenched so tight he'd cracked 2 molars. Every Sunday night felt like preparing for war. He wasn't building anything, he was maintaining an image. And the image was expensive, not just financially, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. He'd stopped reading books that weren't about finance, stopped seeing friends who weren't useful for networking. His entire life had become a performance review. The irony? He never spent the money. He was too busy earning it. The money was just a scorecard, proof that he was winning. Except he felt like he was losing everything that actually mattered. So he quit. No plan, no safety net, just a one-way ticket to Thailand and a vague idea about finding himself. His father didn't speak to him for 6 months. For the first year, Marcus did nothing valuable by society's standards. He taught English to kids in rural villages for free. He read novels, philosophy, poetry. He sat in silence for hours and didn't feel guilty about it. And slowly, something strange started happening. He stopped thinking about what he should want and started noticing what he actually cared about. He cared about education, financial literacy, how compound interest actually works, why debt is a trap most people never escape, the basics that nobody teaches because there's no money in teaching people how to keep their money. He started recording simple videos explaining these concepts. 10-minute lessons, no branding, no strategy, just Marcus with a whiteboard, breaking down ideas that banks make intentionally complicated. He posted them online because a few parents asked for copies. Within 6 months, those videos had 50,000 views. Within a year, 500,000. Within 2-3 million. He wasn't promoting them. He was just answering the same questions over and over until the answers became something people couldn't stop sharing. Then the emails started coming. Schools wanting him to speak. Companies wanting him to train employees. publishers wanting a book. Within 3 years of quitting banking, he was making more than he ever did working 80 hours a week, but now he worked 15 hours a week. On his terms. Marcus didn't escape the chase by being smarter. He escaped it by breaking. And here's what broke him: the realization that chasing money had turned him into a performance artist. Every decision was calculated for optics. Every conversation was networking. Every relationship was transactional. He wasn't living, he was optimizing. And optimization is just another word for self-abandonment. There's a concept in psychology called the goal gradient effect. The closer you get to a goal, the faster you try to reach it. But here's the trap. When you're constantly chasing the next milestone, you never actually arrive anywhere. You just accelerate toward the next thing. Your nervous system stays in survival mode. Your creativity shuts down. And ironically, your performance degrades. Researchers at the University of Chicago studied thousands of participants across multiple industries. People hyper-focused on external rewards, money, status, recognition, consistently underperformed compared to people focused on mastery and internal satisfaction. Not just in happiness, in actual results. The people chasing outcomes produced lower quality work, burned out faster, and were significantly less likely to innovate. The people chasing craft? They outlasted everyone, and they got paid better for it. Because money doesn't care about your intentions, it only cares about your value. And you can't create real value while you're performing. You can only create it when you're present. Let me show you another pattern. Sarah, 34. Spent a decade in corporate marketing. Excellent salary. Corner office by 32. Miserable life. She wasn't bad at her job. She was too good at it. Good enough to see exactly how hollow it all was. The campaigns designed to manipulate people into buying things they didn't need. The promotions kept coming. Bigger titles, bigger salary, and a smaller soul. She walked away to become a freelance writer. Everyone told her she was insane. And for the first year, they were right. She struggled. She took low-paying gigs just to keep the lights on. But she made one decision that changed everything. She refused to write anything she didn't believe in. No manipulative copy. No soulless corporate speak. Most marketers would call that commercial suicide. Sarah called it self-respect. For 6 months, nothing. She was barely surviving. Then she got one client. A small nonprofit working on climate education. They couldn't pay much, but the mission mattered. She poured everything into that project, made their message crystal clear. The campaign went viral, not because she was gaming algorithms, because the message was true and she knew how to make truth compelling. Suddenly other organizations noticed. The kind of clients who weren't looking for someone cheap. They were looking for someone real. Her rates tripled within a year, then tripled again. Within 2 years, she was making more than she did in corporate. But now she only worked with clients whose missions she believed in. She said no more than she said yes. She wasn't chasing clients. She was attracting the right ones. And that distinction is worth millions. Here's the pattern. The moment you stop needing to win, you finally play like someone who can't lose. Because you're not playing for validation anymore. You're playing for craft. And craft always outlasts hustle. Money can smell fear. And most people reek of it. You can hear it in how they pitch, see it in how they price, feel it in how they follow up. They need the sale. They need the validation. And that need repels the very thing they're chasing. But the people who've stopped chasing, they don't need anything from you. They're creating whether you pay attention or not. And paradoxically, that's what makes you want to pay attention. Because we don't follow desperation. We follow conviction. And conviction only shows up when you've made peace with walking away. So what's actually happening here? What's the mechanism behind this paradox? It's not magic. It's not manifestation. It's something far more practical and far more powerful. It's about what happens to your brain when you stop operating from scarcity. When you're chasing money, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for complex thinking, creativity, and long-term planning, gets hijacked by your amygdala, your fear center, your survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you can't think clearly. You can only react. Your entire cognitive bandwidth gets consumed by threat assessment. Is this enough money? Will I be okay? What if I fail? That constant anxiety makes you objectively worse at everything that matters for building wealth. Worse at strategic thinking. Worse at reading people. Worse at seeing opportunities. But the moment you stop chasing, something neurological shifts. Your prefrontal cortex comes back online, and suddenly you start seeing patterns instead of threats, opportunities instead of competition, long games instead of quick wins. Let me show you what this looks like. David was a graphic designer. For 5 years, he took every client who'd pay him. Logo designs for $50. Social media graphics for $20. He was hustling constantly and barely surviving. Every month was a scramble. Then his mother got sick. cancer. He had to take 3 months off. No income. Savings drained. When he came back, he was different. Not because he'd learned some new skill, because he'd remembered what actually mattered. He stopped taking every client. He started saying no. Not because he could afford to, but because he realized that saying yes to everything meant saying no to excellence. He picked one niche, designing for mental health organizations. Not because it was profitable. Because his mother's illness had shown him how much good design mattered in that space. How a well-designed website could be the difference between someone reaching out for help or suffering in silence. He created 5 spec projects, full branding packages for imaginary therapy practices. He put them online with a simple message: this is the only work I want to do. If you're doing something that matters in mental health, let's talk. For 2 months, nothing. He was terrified. Then he got an email. A therapy practice in Portland saw his spec work. They'd been looking for a designer for months. Everyone they'd talked to treated mental health like any other industry. But David's work felt different. Like he understood. Like he cared. They asked his rate. David, for the first time in his career, didn't negotiate against himself. He quoted triple what he used to charge. He expected them to decline. They said yes immediately. Within 6 months, he had 4 clients. Within a year, he was booked 6 months out. Within 2, he was charging 10 times what he used to. Not because he got better at design, because he got better at focus. This is the pattern. Detachment creates focus. Focus creates mastery. Mastery attracts wealth. But here's where most people misunderstand detachment. They think it means not caring. It doesn't. It means not needing. David cared more about his work after he stopped chasing money than he ever did before. But he didn't need the validation. And that freedom from need gave him the space to do work that actually mattered. There's a study from the University of Rochester that tracked people's motivations over 2 decades. They divided participants into 2 groups, those driven by extrinsic goals, wealth, fame, image, and those driven by intrinsic goals, growth, relationships, contribution. The extrinsically motivated group reported higher anxiety, depression, and illness. They were more likely to experience relationship problems and job dissatisfaction. And here's the kicker: they didn't even make more money. Despite spending their entire lives chasing it, their financial outcomes were statistically identical to the intrinsically motivated group. Except the intrinsically motivated group was happier, healthier, more fulfilled. But when researchers followed up another 10 years later, the gap had widened. The intrinsically motivated group was now significantly wealthier. Not because they'd started chasing money, because the skills they developed, deep focus, genuine relationships, creative problem solving, turned out to be exactly what the market valued most. They weren't trying to be valuable. They were becoming valuable. And the market noticed. Here's what nobody tells you about value creation. You can't fake it. Real value comes from one place: solving problems you genuinely understand because you've lived them. Marcus understood financial confusion because he'd lived in financial abundance and still felt poor. That's lived knowledge. And lived knowledge creates insight no competitor can copy. Sarah understood authentic communication because she'd spent a decade creating inauthentic garbage. She knew every manipulation. And that knowledge, combined with her decision to never use it dishonestly again, made her irreplaceable. David understood the power of design in healthcare because he'd watched his mother navigate a system that made seeking help harder than it needed to be. That wasn't abstract knowledge. That was pain. And pain, when transformed into purpose, creates work that changes things. The moment you stop chasing money is usually the moment you start chasing something else: truth, meaning, craft. And those pursuits require something money can never buy: your full attention. You can't master something while you're distracted by what it might earn you. You can't solve complex problems while you're calculating ROI. Mastery requires presence, and presence requires letting go of outcome. Watch someone truly great at what they do: a chef, a surgeon, a musician. When they're working, they're not thinking about money. They're in the work, fully, completely. And that total immersion is what produces work that people can't stop talking about. That's the secret hidden in plain sight. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you've already made peace with. If you've made peace with being average, you'll attract average opportunities. If you've made peace with being overlooked, you'll stay invisible. But if you've made peace with doing exceptional work whether anyone notices or not, you become someone people can't ignore. Because the work speaks, not your desperation, not your pitch, the work. And the work only speaks clearly when you're creating it for its own sake. Marcus didn't need to sell his financial literacy content. It was so clear and useful that people shared it compulsively. Sarah didn't need to pitch clients. Her portfolio did all the talking. David didn't need to market. His spec work was so obviously superior that the right people found him. They weren't chasing, they were creating. And creation is the most powerful form of attraction that exists. So here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. Chasing money is just chasing validation. It's outsourcing your self-worth to a number that will never be enough, because the goal was never actually the money. It was the feeling you thought money would give you: safety, respect, freedom, proof that you matter. But here's what happens when you finally get the money while you're still chasing it. Nothing changes. The number goes up, but the feeling doesn't come. You don't feel safer, you just worry about losing what you have. You don't feel free, you just feel trapped by a lifestyle you have to maintain. The goalpost moves every time you reach it. First it was 6 figures, then $500,000, then $1 million. The hedonic treadmill doesn't stop, it just speeds up. I've seen people make their first million and feel emptier than when they were broke, because they'd spent so long believing that money would solve the feeling, and when it didn't, they had to face something far more terrifying. The problem was never money. The problem was that they'd been running from themselves for so long they'd forgotten who they were running toward. But creating value? That's different. That's chasing truth. And truth always pays. Not because it's noble, but because truth is rare, and rarity is valuable. In a world where everyone is performing, authenticity is disruptive. Being exactly who you are is revolutionary. Not because it's easy, because it's terrifying. It requires letting go of the mask, the performance, the carefully curated version of yourself that you've been maintaining to stay safe. And the moment you let that go, you discover something unexpected. The things you thought made you weird are exactly what make you irreplaceable. The experiences you thought were failures are exactly what give you insight no one else has. Marcus wouldn't have built a financial literacy platform that resonated with millions if he hadn't first spent 7 years in banking hating every second of it. That wasn't wasted time. That was research. His breakdown became his breakthrough. Sarah wouldn't have become the go-to writer for authentic brands if she hadn't first spent a decade creating corporate garbage. Her sellout years became her competitive advantage. David wouldn't have owned the mental health design space if his mother hadn't gotten sick. His pain became his purpose. This is what happens when you stop chasing money and start chasing truth. Your entire history stops being a list of mistakes and becomes a constellation of insights that no one else has. Every failure, every detour, it all becomes material. The exact thing that makes your work irreplaceable. You can't manufacture that. You can't fake it with positioning statements or personal branding. It comes from one place: living honestly and paying attention to what you learn. And here's the paradox within the paradox. The people who've stopped chasing money aren't just wealthier, they're freer, because they've broken the connection between their identity and their bank account. They've built an internal compass that points toward meaning, not metrics. And that freedom is what makes them impossible to compete against. Because you can't out-hustle someone who's not hustling. You can't outmarket someone who's not marketing. You can't beat someone at a game they're not playing. They're playing a different game entirely. And the people who matter most can sense the difference immediately. You're scrolling through options. Freelancers, consultants, products. Most of them sound the same. They're using the same language, making the same promises. They're performing. Then you land on someone different. Something feels real. Their website isn't trying to impress you. Their copy isn't manipulating you. They're just clearly, confidently offering something specific to someone specific. And even if you're not that someone, you respect it. That's what detachment looks like from the outside. Confidence, certainty, calm. And in a world full of desperate noise, calm is magnetic. But here's what it feels like from the inside. It doesn't feel like you've figured everything out. It feels like you've finally stopped pretending you have to. It feels like permission. Permission to be exactly who you are. Permission to say no to anything that doesn't align. Because when you're not performing, you're present. When you're present, you notice things other people miss. And slowly, inevitably, you build something that compounds in ways hustle never could. Hustle is linear. You put in hours, you get results. But creation compounds. The video you made 3 years ago still brings clients. The article you wrote keeps getting shared. The product you built keeps generating revenue while you sleep. Because you weren't creating for today's outcome. You were creating something that would last. Something true. And things that last are things built from truth, not tactics. So what does this mean for you? First, stop lying to yourself about why you're chasing money. Not because lying is wrong. Because it's expensive. It costs you clarity. It costs you energy. It costs you time. If you're chasing money because you think it'll make you feel worthy, it won't. The only thing that makes you feel worthy is doing work you're proud of. And you can start that today. Second, notice where you're performing instead of creating. Where are you doing things because they look right instead of because they are right? Where are you saying yes when you mean no? Those are the places where you're leaking power. Third, give yourself permission to focus, not on everything, on one thing, the one problem you're uniquely positioned to solve, the one audience you genuinely understand. Stop trying to be everything everything to everyone and become undeniable to someone. That's where the money is. In depth, not breadth. And finally, make peace with walking away from clients who drain you, from opportunities that look good but feel wrong, from versions of success that require you to betray yourself. Because the moment you're willing to walk away is the moment you become someone worth following. This isn't a tactic. This is a transformation. The people who don't chase money aren't lucky. They're not special. They just made a different choice. They chose truth over tactics, meaning over metrics, purpose over profit. And that choice changed everything. Not overnight, but inevitably. Because when you stop betraying yourself, you become someone the world can't help but pay attention to. That's the paradox. The people who stop chasing money don't do it to get rich. They do it to stay sane, to stay honest, to stay themselves. And wealth, real wealth, the kind that compounds and lasts and feels like freedom, that only comes to people who've made peace with who they are without it. So maybe the question isn't how to make more money. Maybe the real question is, who would you be if money didn't matter? What would you build if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you finally give yourself permission to pursue? Because the moment you answer that honestly, the moment you start living from that answer instead of performing around it, everything changes. The desperate noise fades, the comparison stops mattering, and you start building something real, something true, something that might take longer but lasts forever. And if this story made you rethink what wealth really means, if it shifted something in how you see success or value or the game you've been playing, then subscribe to Hidden Money, because this is what we do here. We uncover what's truly behind the numbers, the psychology, the patterns, the hidden mechanisms that separate people who chase their entire lives from people who build something that lasts. This isn't about tactics, it's about truth, and truth is the only thing worth chasing, because truth is the only thing that sets you free, and freedom is the only wealth that actually matters.